This is my message to Austria. Congratulations! You've managed to preserve one of the greatest absurdities of modern times. Compulsory military service. What a brilliant way to show young men that their lives belong to the state. Imagine, in 2024, this glorious system still exists. The system where you have to put your life on hold for 6 months to do push-ups and listen to some old sadistic sergeant yelling at you, compensating for their own failures. And the best part? The gender twist. Man, mandatory conscription. Women, feel free to build your careers or travel the world. No one's bothering you here. Equality? That has been erased from the Austrian government's dictionary. Never mind that it's utterly outdated and degrading. As long as we have the famous social peace, right? Oh, but I almost forgot about the wonderful civilian service alternative. Fantastic! Wow! Rather than crawling through the mud, you can wipe butts in nursing homes for peanuts. Forget about the fact that these jobs should be properly paid and done by people who choose them willingly. That's not the way it is. And the argument of defending the homeland? Come on, Austria is a neutral country surrounded by friendly neighbors. What exactly are you expecting? An invasion by Switzerland armed with chocolate and watches? I don't know. So thank you, Austria. Thank you for this 19th century lesson. I hope one day you will realize that modern society doesn't need an army of forced slaves, but a system that respects freedom and individuality. Until then, enjoy your compulsory nonsense. With love, someone who's fed up with your compulsory bullshit. This system is a senseless parody of modern humanity. It's absolutely absurd. Austria is supposed to be a country that values freedom and human rights, but conscription goes against these principles. Forcing people into service instead of letting them to choose how to contribute to society is not fair or democratic. The idea that conscription brings people together or teaches responsibility is also a big BS. Real civic responsibility comes from people volunteering to help their communities, because they care, not because they are forced. Forcing people into service does not build unity. It creates anger and frustration. Forcing young people into regret, predetermined roles destroys creativity and innovation. Many people could be using their time and energy to pursue studies, start businesses, or be working on projects that contribute to society in meaningful and innovative ways. Instead, they are forced into roles that limit their potential and creativity. Conscription ignores the ethical and moral objections of individuals who might oppose military or civil service. People who oppose it on principle. Forcing people to participate in systems that violate their deeply held beliefs is not only unjust, but also harmful to their mental and emotional well-being. While some argue that civil service provides an alternative, even this option does not respect the fundamental right to refuse service entirely. Any system that forces people into service creates opportunities for abuse and corruption. Whether it's unfair exemptions for certain groups, exploitation of conscripts as cheap labor, or even mistreatment during service, which there were many cases in Austria actually. Conscription reinforces outdated social norms, such as unquestionable obedience to authority and regret hierarchy. By forcing young men into these structures, the system perpetuates old ways of thinking that are slowing down the social progress. There is a certain psychological impact of forced obedience. Being compelled to follow orders without question, even in non-military roles, can have lasting psychological effects. Conscription normalizes a mindset of submission, where individuals learn to suppress their own judgment and accept authority without critical evaluation. A society that values freedom and democracy should encourage its citizens to think critically, not train them to blindly follow orders. Conscription is devaluing consent in society. Conscription sends a troubling message about the role of consent in society. It normalizes the idea that people can be compelled to act against their will, if the government deems it's necessary. This undermines the broader principle of consent, the principle of personal freedom and human rights. In a society that values autonomy and respect for individual choice, it also destroys the trust in equality. Many people rightfully perceive conscription as unfair, with some individuals often finding ways to avoid service. This is destroying the trust in fairness of the system and contributes to a feeling of inequality among citizens. Conscription in Austria is serving no meaningful purpose in the modern world. It's an inefficient system that imposes unnecessary burdens on young people while providing little to no value to national security. First and foremost, Austria faces no genuine military threats. The country is surrounded by stable neighbors, and the idea of preparing for a large-scale invasion or military conflict is completely unrealistic in this geopolitical context. The argument that conscription is necessary for defense is no longer valid. Forcing unmotivated young men into brief, superficial training does nothing to prepare the country for real security challenges.